speaker, Virginia Kuhn, who is an associate professor in the Media Arts and Practice Division of the School of Cinematic Arts at the University of Southern California. Her work centers on ways in which communication and expression are impacted by digital culture, particularly with the addition of, to text of sound, images, and interactivity as semiotic resources. She directs the Honors in Multimedia Scholarship Program and a graduate certificate in media arts and culture. She serves on the editorial boards of a number of really important journals in the space, including Kairos, a journal of rhetoric, technology, a journal of rhetoric, technology, and pedagogy, and the Journal of Interactive Technology and Pedagogy. One of Virginia's current research projects is the VAT, which stands for Video Analysis Tableau. The VAT applies computational analysis to the study of moving image media. And that's all I'm going to say about it for now, because I really want Virginia to introduce it to everyone. I first saw Virginia speak about the VAT at this past spring's SCMS, the Society for Cinema and Media Studies, which is like the MLA of media studies scholars. And I was enraptured by the potential of this powerful tool. So without any further delay, please join me in welcoming Virginia Kuhn.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thanks for having me. I'm really honored to be here at this series, and I hope you'll be interested in what I have to say. So I want to just back up a little bit and talk about the reason why I started pursuing this line of inquiry in the first place, and some of the guiding premises that kind of inform all of the work that I do. And I might just stand up because I'm a little bit better on my feet. Is that digital technologies are now as amenable to images as they are to words. And so it is a common form of cultural production, and one that is important to study and to be able to deploy. And that brings me to my second guiding premise, is that contemporary literacy, and we talked earlier that literacy is not the best term for it, because it implies kind of a print-based orientation. But if we're thinking about literacy today, and the ability to marshal all the available semiotic resources, and that is my kind of go-to definition. That's a bit of a mashup between Aristotle by Persuasion and the New London Group. So competent control of the available semiotic resources means that we have to be able to be fluent in the language of not only words, but of images, of data, of these other forms of kind of cultural production. And the third one is the notion of the fifth estate. And I take that from one of my mentors, Gregory Ulmer, who suggests that critical theorists these days need to weigh in about matters of large public concern. And I really believe that. I think that I spent about 13 years after my bachelor's degree in art history doing software development and other things in the private sector before I went back to school for a master's and doctorate in rhetoric and cinema. And I think that to be caught up in the ivory tower is not the best place for academics. I think that we should be out there, we should be weighing in, and particularly those of us who study culture, it's incumbent upon us to weigh in and to confront these issues and these challenges that face contemporary culture, and to do so with an ethical framework. And I mean, the other notion of the fifth estate, the reason it's the fifth estate, not like the film, not like WikiLeaks, but actually in comparison to the fourth estate, you know, journalism, which I would say in a 24/7 news cycle, the whole notion of objectivity is sort of out the window, because the things that we cover or that we choose to focus on, that in itself are ideological decisions. And so without, I don't even presume objectivity. I definitely do the work that I do because I want to make the world a better place. I think that the representation is key. I think the state of things right now are not optimal, and I think that through both the field of representation and the education of students is a way to kind of weigh in and culture. So this In 2005, I defended one of the first born digital dissertations in the country. And think about this, that was pre-YouTube. So I was in a very kind of traditional program. My doctorate's from an English department, and I knew that I was interested in the ways in which digital technologies were shifting what it means to actually communicate and express in the contemporary world. And so I had to put this up there because we were talking a little bit before. This is this kind of wacky 1972 television series by the BBC called Ways of Seeing. And it was really, it brought Marxist cultural theory and the Frankfurt School, and especially the work of Walter Benjamin, to a more popular audience. And so I was actually hand ripping. I was taking VCRs and hand ripping some of the images from that. But one of the underlying premises is that the advent of color photography changed the way we view the art of the past, and that it, there's a kind of John Berger in this series says, the authenticity of the art of the past is lost. What's in its place is this language of images. And what matters now is who uses those images and to what use they are put. So I felt really strongly that I had to enact my own theory. So these are just a couple of screenshots from this platform that I used to create this natively digital dissertation. It was done in a software platform called TK3, which was created by the Institute for the Future of the Book, or this collective, Night Kitchen, and a gentleman named Bob Stein, who had started the Criterion Collection and had a company called Voyager, and was really looking for a case to kind of get behind and support, to have someone actually do a digital dissertation. That there had been notice of some before, but they were largely text-based, I would say, and they also, there was actually, the very first one was based in fan fiction. It was Xeno Warrior Princess, done by Christine Bosey, who's a friend of mine now. I talk to a lot, but I cite her in mine. That was done in 1998. And we didn't have another one that really qualified as media rich that I'm aware of, and I know a lot of them, until 2005. And I knew that I had to keep the metaphor of the book for more traditionalists. And in many ways, when you're at the edge, I think you have to work twice as hard. I had this, my dissertation was, the several hundred pages of words, but then also images and moving images. And what I liked about this tool is that you can see in this middle slide that's, it's a thing called an annobeam. So it actually allows you to footnote something and to know where it came from without having to, in the early 2000s, hypertext, you had to click on a link and you would go somewhere else and you weren't sure if you were coming back and you didn't know what that was. So and it just disrupted every kind of reading practice you had. So this actually solved a lot of issues, and you could endlessly put things, you could contain them and contain them and contain them inside annotations. So it really allowed a sort of nuanced interplay of word, image, sound, and moving image. So that was the start of my work in this area, really. And the reason I spent 9 months actually making sure that my doctorate I was gonna keep it, because it was actually up for grabs for a minute there. And oddly enough, it was the Chronicle of Higher Education, I think, that forced the hand. They did a big issue on it. And the day that I had my picture taken for the article, I got a call from the reporter saying that the university had just emailed him and said they were FedExing my doctorate. I mean, I was at USC working for 9 months already, so I wasn't all that worried, but still. It was this kind of pressure that made them finally decide that it was okay, because I was under huge pressure to print out a copy in some way, and I had to argue that the images were integral to the argument and that it couldn't be expressed elsewhere. So that would be one reason, that's one reason I often want to study moving image media, and I want to create with it. But here's some other ones. There's more footage. I think the stat is pretty well known, but I just did a recent suggestion that there's more footage uploaded to YouTube in an hour than one can view in a lifetime. It's crazy. I mean, you couldn't even, I guess the argument could be made for books that we can't read all the books in the world, but certainly books are not a time-based medium. And being a time-based medium, we know exactly how long it takes, and we could never read them all. And then Cisco actually did a study recently too that suggests by 2020, video will comprise 82% of consumer internet traffic. And that is a pretty amazing statistic when we think about all of the screens that surround us, the ways in which these images are bombarding us, and that we just don't really understand what the ramifications of that really are. We know in some ways, but in other ways it's an open question. So without having sufficient tools to study this media, this huge aspect of culture is essentially invisible to us. So I thought, have to go farther and try and study this media. There's the two key reasons, again, besides its ubiquity, that makes it difficult to study and actually very important to study is also its complexity. So I think, films seem to be both objective and subjective at the same time. They are in some ways a mechanical recording of events, and so they seem to, be, without human intervention. Of course, film scholars know that that's not true, but just the very notion that to film something is to frame it, and to frame it is to exclude all else, makes it a really ideologically imbued endeavor. This is a piece from Vertov's kind of seminal film, A Man with a Movie Camera, that really highlighted the ways in which film could now give us access to things we could not see before, but it also includes a lot of ideologically unneutral or not politically innocent kind of aspects. The other thing, though, about the medium's complexity is that it invokes all registers of meaning. I mean, in some ways, I follow Lev Manovich with this in the language of new media, that cinema was the first multimedia. Particularly in the silent cinema, where you had a lot of text, you had a really interesting interplay between words and images. Moving images with the integration of sound. We have all these registers of meaning operating at the same time, and in ways that are kind of tricky to pin down and study. So that makes it, I think, important and also difficult to study, but for sure important to create in terms of its impact on large-scale literacy. And the first sort of, this is an area of study for me, but also an area of production. Because if we're thinking about video being one of the key roles of contemporary literacy, then it's not really enough to just simply stop it and start it and look at it and study. That's a wonderful thing that digital technologies have allowed us to do, is have access to being able to study these things over a sustained period of time. But also, you really, I firmly believe that you need to actually be able to construct image-based media to be able to really be fluent in it. And the example that I gave earlier today, and that I often give, is if you were thinking about another language, I certified in French for my doctorate, but honestly, I'm not very fluent anymore. I mean, I can understand words, but I can't construct a sentence very well anymore. I'm not fluent, you know? And so I think in the same way that if we're considering literacy to be something that is both reading and writing, then we have to understand images and we have to also produce them. So these are just several areas that I've published in peer-reviewed journals. One is about students documenting their work, their digital media work. This is from the Honors and Multimedia Scholarship Program. This is an edited collection of video-based essays that was published with several colleagues around the country. This was the first version of it, and then finally this top item is the first article done in a platform called Scalar, which was developed at USC initially, and now it's being developed. There's a team, a consortium of people, largely in the US, but that are behind kind of the implementation of this platform. And the reason I'm showing it is that, you know, it's always so dogged to try and produce something scholarly in these materials. You know, we coded this in HTML5, so, you know, it's okay, but we used to have to use Flash-based interfaces, and for those of you who know Adobe Flash, that these two are coded in, they don't like words. You know, it's really hard to put a lot of words in, and, you know, I am a scholar, I sort of need those words to work for me. So the Scalar platform actually allows you to do all of the things that TK3 allowed me to do for my dissertation, but in a format that is online and networked. And I just mention it again because it's a platform created by academics for scholarship. It's not something created by industry. It's not created for the entertainment industry, and it's, you know, the underlying functionality I trust, you know, and it's open source, and again, that is just a huge matter of, a huge issue for me. Just not to belabor this too terribly much, but in launching video essays as a digital argument, that's something that's gaining a lot of ground these days. But hasn't been the case for a very long time, and I started teaching with this approach in about the 2007 and 8 year when we at USC, because I'm in the School of Cinema, we had this documentary that we had created that was footage of an exchange we did between doctors at the Keck School of Medicine at USC and doctors in Baghdad, because one of the problems was that there was a lack of, you know, the sanctions that had been imposed on Iraq for many years had stopped any kind of training for a lot of their doctors, and they just were desperate for both materials and for updated knowledge. And so we flew, there was a series of us sending surgeons to Baghdad and bringing the surgeons here, and the White House actually heard about it, and they flew the whole crew to the White House, and they met with the president and other members, and this documentary ends with one of the surgeons, it's on the eve of Saddam Hussein's capture, and they're at the White House, and this surgeon is saying, you know, Saddam killed my father, I'm so glad they captured him, things are going to get better in my country, maybe not right away, but in 5 years. And it was 5 years later, and things had gotten decidedly worse. So we took, myself and my colleague, who's a documentary filmmaker, took this hundreds of hours of B-roll and gave it to students in a class. We used it like as the textbook for the class, and students viewed this 30-minute documentary. We didn't quite finish it, but it was in pretty good shape. And some of the issues that were raised by that, whether they were health issues or embargo issues or other sorts of global issues, they were to take that up, do some more research, and create these digital arguments, which is where we started really doing this on a large scale at scale and doing it as a regular class, it became really, really popular and really kind of watershed. And I kind of flew all over the country and all over the world, sort of talking about this approach. And I have this great anecdote because I was presenting this at MIT. It was at one of the media and technology conferences. And I had showed just one little piece that we had students do as kind of a warm-up piece. It was on the 2008 election. And someone sort of challenged me in the audience to challenge the scholarly nature of it, because of course, anytime you put sound or music, a soundtrack to something, it's no longer scholarship. And I sort of, I've regretted it ever since, because I kind of it was a warm-up exercise, and I just could kick myself ever since I presented that piece. It's about stereotypes Muslim stereotypes in the US. And it's actually a really brilliant piece, and so I show it often. But I really had to get myself past that hump of thinking that, theoretically this is scholarship and this is important, but then, when called to question for its validity, it really, it took me a little while to actually have that figured out. So I would just say that there's a lot of biases that go into making some of this work. And I'm not immune to them by any means. After this class, it's become a regular course offering, and the next year, Robert Greenwald, who has a production company called Brave New Films, they do activist filmic work and often crowdsourced work. They were in the middle of doing this project called Rethink Afghanistan, and it was actually a film comprised of many people sending their footage in, and they cut massive amounts of, they came up with one kind of DVD of it, but there was a whole lot of extra footage. And so we got about 300 hours of footage on that and used that to inform the next class. We then started working with the USC based Shoah Visual History Archive. For those of you who don't know it, there's 52,000 interviews with Holocaust survivors that have been painstakingly transcribed and tagged. The Shoah Visual History Archive was started by Steven Spielberg after he did the film Schindler's List. And because it was, very heavily endowed, shall we say, it was hand tagged, all of it, and it was, they have a whole thesaurus and an indexing system. It took years to do this, and I don't think it's anything that will get repeated very quickly. So that is one of the examples for how there could be some will to complete this kind of work, but it just hasn't been done to date. So in many ways, this was some of the easier tasks than scrolling, trying to get through 200 hours of footage for these other classes. And then the last thing I just want to mention is that in 2010, I co-taught a class with the Institute for Global Health at USC with a colleague there, and the UN DCP had all this footage of AIDS testimony, and they asked us if we could work with it, and we did work with it in this class. And that year, I think it was called AIDS 2012, it was the first time that the conference on HIV and AIDS had been held in the United States, because we had these, there were regulations about declaring yourself HIV positive to enter the country, and so activists just didn't want to come here for so many years. They finally did in 2012, and many of these videos were shown at that conference. So it was, it's really gratifying in that way too, that we can actually have our work exceed the confines of the classroom. One of the issues, however, that arose with this sort of work, besides the fact that it was really, really difficult to try and sort through all the footage, I had my husband does new media work, and he was asked to advise a couple of students that had graduated from Stanford in engineering, and they had come up with this app that lets you take the scripts or the spoken track from a film and matches it up to the time codes in the film, so you can get at something that you want to see within a couple of seconds. And I heard him advising them, and I'm like, you need to put this to something good. You know, they have like 1,000 Stanford students training clips of wedding crashers, which is great, but you know, we needed to do it. So they were great. They indexed all this footage and allowed us, which just significantly helped our work. Still, there were other issues to confront, and I was, you know, just grappling about looking for a way to get a tool built that would kind of automate some of these processes. The other thing that happened at the time, though, is and this is a piece that I published in, I guess, 2010, the footage that we were doing and the projects that the students were doing, they would often incorporate news footage, and they started getting takedown notices on YouTube. I got horrible notices from 2007 on, and I actually got one a few months ago about the same project from YouTube. And I talk about it in this piece because I was so furious. It's actually kind of illegal to do this, what YouTube is doing by issuing these takedown notices. There was a case in 2008, Stephanie Lenz versus Warner Brothers, where the judge ruled that any case of fair use has to be investigated before takedown notices are issued. So I was at the Open Video Alliance the month after this came out, and there's thousands of us, and Fred Van Loman, who is the attorney for the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who I was so happy to have that support, particularly for my work on my dissertation. He turns out, had just joined Google, which is YouTube. And, you know, I got the last question in, I was like, what are you gonna do? Like, YouTube had just disabled 250,000 videos the night before, like overnight, because Viacom had given them notices that it was all copyright infringement. And there were two things about that. Number one is there is automation. Automation exists. Where is my use of an automated server? It turns out that's not exactly the case. But number two is where, you know, who is limiting who may speak? And I don't think that it's really, you know, up to Google and YouTube to suggest that someone can't talk. I filled out first thing I did is I took all the students' names off it because I was so, you know, worried it would be on their permanent record. And then I filled out all these long battles, all these forms that said, you know, I'm their professor. They cited just enough to make their argument. Or used just enough to make their argument. They cited it. And it was put back up. And this has gone on back and forth ever since. I mean, it's just years. So looking for an alternative to that was very, very much on my mind. Which is why, it seems to have wanted to run away there, but that was just the Internet Archive. Excuse me for that glitch. The Internet Archive, which has been my go-to place ever since, and I always use the Internet Archive for looking at things, for accessing, for getting footage, but now I use it for harping footage. So a lot of the work that we create, because on any given semester in my division, there's at least 6 classes creating video essays and digital arguments. So we have a huge corpus. So I use it for the things that we create, but also all of the early work we've done with the video analysis tableau has been on Internet Archive films. Not only because they tend to be public domain and we're looking for methods rather than actual, you know, content, because this methodology is so new, but also both Brewster Kahle and Rick Prolinger and all the members of the Internet Archive are real activists, you know, with similar goals. So again, I think that's a really important kind of approach, or an important thing to consider when we're doing this sort of work. I mean, I'm very sensitive to it being in a school of cinema in Hollywood, you know, so. But I do know, and although this work can be difficult at times and, you know, time-consuming, it's absolutely crucial. I mean, this is this book that I've been reading that came out, Weapons of Math Destruction, by Kathy O'Neill, who has a PhD in computer science and worked in the private sector too, in finance, and really started realizing some of the biases that occur in the algorithms that are being used to justify everything from home loans to placement in schools to that, and they by and large are targeted or have the bad effects on the people that need them most, you know, people that already have very little power. So I just like to always remind myself about this when we're sweating and when our code was just compromised and all of these things where I feel like, oh, I wish I could just be writing books, you know, and just doing regular kind of work. When I realized that it's incumbent upon me to weigh in on these tools or help this tool creation. So finally then, that brings me to the video analysis tableau, and the reason that I really felt so strongly about starting this. And it's a project that I've been working on for a couple of years, ever since the very first flash-based supercomputer was deployed, and it was deployed at the San Diego Supercomputing Center. And it was called Gordon. It's already on its way to retirement. But it was the first instance of a big a flash memory, which is like a giant thumb drive, so it could process, I hope I'm not oversimplifying that for computer scientists in the crowd, but we suspected that it would finally allow us to process on demand these vast amounts of filmic material. And it did, to some extent. I fought several battles with getting the resources I need and the access I need and getting it on demand. And it still turns out that automating the search of video archives is massively computationally intensive. It's just a huge, huge endeavor. I'm going to talk a little bit about the ways in which we do that, and then show just a quick 2-minute overview of the tool itself. So if we're thinking about studying, I mean, forget even producing this material, but just studying it, just letting it open to cultural criticism. There's kind of 3 ways that I can see to do this. I mentioned before the automated detection software that YouTube uses. That's actually just the soundtrack. So automating sound, I mean, that's why we have Shazam on our phone. You know, we can automate sound. Sound is not as difficult, technologically speaking. Even the Nielsen ratings that now, Nielsen tracks users and what they're watching, they use it just the soundtrack when it's digital. Image tracks are definitely a far more dicey proposition. But there seems to be 3 ways that we need to figure out how to do this. The first would be to annotate media. So you have, you know, we've got the people who study film for a long time, and they can go in and annotate media. But we probably also need some form of machine reading, and then also visualization, because now we're looking at a time and an image-based medium. How do we make that available to a visualization? I mean, one would be to spatialize it, and I'll show just a little bit of that in a moment. But other visualizations can help us in other ways. So of these 3 sort of acts, let's just talk about annotation. Well, it's hugely labor intensive. I mean, even if you're not even if you're not annotating in real time on a timeline, I don't mean real time, but on a timeline in the film, like a time-based annotation, it's still to tag and conceptually tag filmic media is really difficult. Again, the Show a Visual History Archive took years to do that. And this was all just survivor testimony that by and large is just one talking head, you know, in the frame talking about their experience. But that was a massively huge, multi-million-dollar endeavor. And actually, the humans that they had hand viewing the stuff and tagging it, they had to send them to therapy about every 6 weeks because you're so bogged down by hearing about all this horror and having to engage with it. It was creating depression among the people that were tasked with working on it, to show you the power of images on us. So it's massively labor intensive, but it also only gives us access to a single film or a single footage at a time, which that is a problem comparing films across genres or comparing media across genres, which is an integral part of it, because that's all the context around it. But there's also this slippage that you get when a word stands in for an image. You know, there's an excess of meaning that you can't capture with words. Not only are there many, many languages, although many times English speakers forget that, there are many words for the same kind of concept. And just to show the implications of that, this came out on the Harvard Business Review just a few days ago, and it says new evidence shows, it says search engines reinforce stereotypes. It's not actually just search engines, it's image search. Every study they've done, when you put in a certain amount of words and you get the images retrieved, they confirm every stereotype that we try and obliterate, or that, you know, those of us who work in this area try and remove ourselves from. So clearly, that's not the way to go. So my team has not been focusing as much on annotation for these reasons, and because there are other projects with whom we have close ties that are doing annotation. So just to note too that the difference between, sorry, that was out of place. Here's the thing about machine reading and human vision though. Do you guys know the CAPTCHA, you know, that you fill out to get a web form? That is all. That was actually done as a PhD project many years ago by Louis Van On. And the reCAPTCHA is when you type both words, what you're doing is digitizing the web, because their machine vision is just not sufficient yet. They've made improvements in optical character recognition, but not sufficient, especially for older texts. So while detecting words is a little bit less dicey of a proposition than images, we're still not in a really great place. And human vision is very good at filling in this context. So humans are able to do this. What humans are not able to do very well, and what machine reading really helps, is this selective attention. So I'll just kind of let this run behind me. There's no sound to it. Well, evidently I can't walk and shoot a gun at the same time. This is this test that has been shown a lot, and it was, it's basically when humans are told to count the number of players wearing different colored t-shirts, they tend to miss other things that come into their visual field. And normally they say that at least the first time you view this, you're not able to see because you're so intent on kind of processing and counting, you're not tending to see what probably you're all alert to right now. But this has been conducted more than once, sometimes with a gorilla walking through, and people don't tend to see other things that come in the field of vision. So while humans are great at contextual elements, they're not so great at attention, or they have a hierarchy for what they view visually. And this was never so much made clear to me as in a film from 2011 called Sucker Punch that was done by Zack Snyder, and it was uniformly hated. It was one of those films that you found no one saying anything good about. Feminists hated it, they called it faux feminism. Gamer boys hated it, they called it unwatchable. And the issue is that you look at the reviews at the time, and without going too far into the details of it, it's about a young girl, and when she's forced to like literally dance for her dinner, they force her into these dance scenes, and the minute the camera cuts to she starts dancing, the camera cuts to her point of view, and we see she goes off on these adventures, and it becomes this alternate world, and then we're only returned to her when the adventure is over, and we see her sweating or kind of glistening, I guess, and the men are just transfixed. It is so close to, there's another character that talks about her gyrations. And the first time I viewed it, you actually think you see her dancing. But upon sustained analysis, and this is what the feminist critics, they actually called out. There were several who reported that it was obscene the way she was dancing. She never dances. You never see it in the film. So that's just to say that we need intervention of humans, but we need also the computer vision can be really helpful, particularly in helping us see things that we don't often see, and in helping us not see things that aren't there. So with that, these are just an overview of some of the goals of the project, the Video Analysis Tableau. So I'm going to just show a quick 2.5-minute overview because, again, project documentation, we do video to do that. So I think our sound should be good because we had it before.
The Video Analysis Tableau is a tool for analyzing vast video archives. Video, whether recorded digitally or digitized film, is a rapidly expanding form of cultural production, one made possible by the proliferation of personal recording technologies and hosting platforms like YouTube and the Internet Archive. The VAT is a research project aimed at establishing a software workbench for video analysis, annotation, and visualization, using both current and experimental discovery methods. Led by Virginia Kuhn of the USC School of Cinematic Arts, the VAT's project team includes experts in supercomputing, media studies, computational analysis, the digital humanities, and computer vision. It is supported by the National Science Foundation's Extreme Science and Engineering Discovery Fund. Built on the Clouder Multimedia Database Framework, the VAT employs a host of algorithms for machine reading and allows user-generated tagging. Upon ingestion, footage is indexed and segmented. This pre-processing allows users to quickly preview a video by its major segments and select a particular frame to be queried across a specified collection of videos. Clicking on the similar link will return the top 10 results for each of the 17 descriptors, such as RGB, gray histogram, edge detection, color layout, and more. Each result includes a calculation of the relative distance from the query frame to the frame returned, providing a pedagogical component as users get a glimpse of the process that takes place under the hood. Users can then hone their query frame based on this understanding, even as they construct new research questions and pursue their own further inquiry. The VAT also includes a novel visualization, the movie slice. Visualization, which acts as a barcode, is created by imagining the footage as a three-dimensional volume and taking a slice through all of the frames. This de-emphasizes the content to allow focus on the formal elements of the footage. The VAT's goal is to fill existing gaps in scholars' abilities to ask cultural questions about filmic media using computers. It also allows experimentation with transformative methods in research and analysis. The long-term goal is to allow researchers to move with agility from textual description to manual inspection, to automated filtering, to visualizing single films as well as whole collections.
So that is just a brief overview of it, and I would just say that to kind of sum up, that we have experimented with multiple ways of getting this together and getting it into some shape that can be used from methods of, and I think it's important to talk about because we often, don't talk about the kind of failures, but we've tried so many different ways to kind of make the back-end architecture work kind of quickly and to pre-process and index it, but still allow users to upload. We opened a gateway not very long ago, and some of the user-generated content actually compromised the code, so I'm kind of in the middle of a massive broken machine right now, broken set of code, but we have made some good strides, and we've done some kind of interesting work. So I want to allow some time, but so I'll just kind of swing through some of the visualizations that we have adopted. And if you're interested, this link here gives you all of the visualizations that we've tried on a big page from one of the team who is applying the methods he uses for scientific visualization to filmic media. I have a couple of the examples here, but this, as I said, that kind of gives us the whole set. Some of the ways that we've tried are just taking different surfaces and imagining the film as a volume and index, or sometimes just removing some frames or applying blur techniques. There's names for all of these. We tried many different sizes or many different shapes to see what sort of visual information we could get from there, and as well as kind of removing some of the features within the frame. Our biggest challenge, I would say, moving forward is not only to get the code and the architecture more amenable to many uploads by users, but also to figure out ways to approach filmic media as more than just a stack of its frames. Every computer vision algorithm to date works kind of okay on still images, and the way that it works when you're dealing with film is by just cutting it frame by frame, slicing it up, and going through it. That is no longer going to be the case. The content that we make these days, the content that I teach, that I produce myself, is multiple, it's layered, it's got the notion of the frame is disappearing, and it's just not something that we can hang our hats on anymore. So while it may work for historical kind of film, it's not going to work in the future. So those are our underlying questions. So with that, and in good time, I think, I thank you for having me and open it up to any
Virginia, could you say a little bit more about the disappearance of the frame?
Yeah, I mean, I think that pretty soon, and I often do this, and when I'm presenting in an audience, I say, how many devices do you have with you right now that are able to record images? It's usually, 2, 3, sometimes more, but everyone's got at least one. And I think it won't be too terribly long before these have depth cameras. We've already seen, with the both the Connect and the Move, all these other cameras, that with space, we're getting to spatialize this kind of media, and so at the furthest level, we're going to be needing to actually scan for far more than just the flat surface of a 2D. But even just 2D images, or just a kind of traditional filmic text, if you notice, and we certainly notice when we're running a lot of these through computer vision, that transitions are really long these days. I remember when Levmanovich was doing some of the early work, he said, we always count 2 or 3 frames in after a transition to get rid of the black space, because it's not 2 or 3 frames anymore. You actually have to, there's very few moments where you can distinctly tell one segment from the next, and that's getting to be more and more common. I know in the work that, that we're producing, for sure, there's a certain amount of layering that persists sometimes past a segment. Some of it persists, some of it doesn't. So really just the note, you know, we're actually trying to make the best use of the fact that it's a moving image. And so the frame by frame situation is just not no longer a metaphor that kind of works. I do think on the very outside that where we're going, although I certainly don't know that much about it, is going to be where screens themselves are disappearing. You know, that we're not seeing that metaphor so much anymore. So I think all of these things just suggest that the notion of the frame is not quite the right one. Yeah.
I was wondering, so I mean, I don't know if this is almost done or whatever, but I'm assuming that there's already, like some organizations have shown some interest in the project. Can I know a little bit about which ones?
Yeah, well, I actually have a massive group of users wanting access to it, and I've been really not granting all as much access simply because I was concerned about what happened, which didn't happen. So we're doing projects with Dartmouth, mostly academics, because I really feel strongly about that component of it. Although I will say that some of my colleagues in the production division of the School of Cinema, and particularly those in editing, are really interested, and they suggest that we should bring the studios on board, because studios are very much alert to the fact that they don't have sufficient tagging and indexing of their footage, because in a global market they're not able to show certain properties except when other things are in release, and they simply don't know what it is. And so
Could you, I don't know what you mean by certain properties.
well, so if, say, you're showing, okay, so let's just take a base example. Netflix, if I'm in Ireland, my Netflix is showing me far different films than if I'm here. And the complex kind of contracts that they have these days with showing content suggest that if something's in circulation, you can't have something else in circulation, you can have different properties. So I've been told that they're very, very keen to index and organize this footage. It's not interesting to me at all to work with them because, but of course I get sucked into it. I mean, my dissertation was a critique of Hollywood, and I wind up being USC making a job for me in the School of Cinema. So I'm not going to say never, but mostly it's academic institutions, and we partner with the Sally Potter Archive in the UK with all of her footage. We have a project with Dartmouth, with Martin Williams there on the Media Ecology Project. We also have University of Wisconsin-Madison. Let's see, there's York University in Canada, so it's universities by and large. But I've been, you know, confining it a little bit. The people in the U.S. that work on it right now are at Urbana-Champaign, at Arizona State, at Texas TAC, it's the Texas Computing Center, San Diego Supercomputing Center. That's about it. Yeah. So.
The reason I ask is, I mean, I see this is, I think this is the meaning of the next big data movement, at least I think. Because, I mean, because of how much video is already out there. Right? So, I mean, I don't know, like years, it's going to be too soon. But it's weird to see that you're really focused on trying to stay within academia.
Well, I'm not focused on that, but I think there's so few tools that are meant for scholarly work. It's not to say that, you know, there's a lot of people in the private sector doing this work. I did somewhat similar work when I was in the private sector, but, you know, my emphasis is on open source, and it's about cultural criticism. It's not really, you know, it's not as much about free enterprise. That's why I left. So I'm sure there is, and I want to, you know, we, for instance, like Google has given seed funding for similar projects and stuff. I don't really, I feel like if you take that money, it dictates how you develop things, and I'm not willing to do that. Luckily, I have the luxury that I don't have to do that. You know, I used to joke that every degree I get, I make less money, but you know, but I'm happy. So yeah, so I think there are huge implications, and that would be great, but it's not the target audience for sure. Yeah. And there was, sorry.
I was just wondering if you have kind of contact with some of these other video analytic tools, like the recently, the Gina Davis Institute.
Oh,
work.
yeah.
Is that,
Well,
how do you see this fitting into that?
yeah, you know, Gina Davis is great, and she's done so much work. She's funded all this work at in the Annenberg School with my colleague Stacy Smith. A lot of that is hand done. They just it's definitely hand annotated. I have a bunch of students I know actually work toward those. I think that's really important work, and insofar as they've really done work with Hollywood Oscar-nominated films, that's huge. It's just, again, the computer vision element isn't there. Now, they just released this last project that they did with St. Mary's College with actually Shri, who's one of our computer scientists at USC. And I've been meaning to be in touch with them. We just co-taught on this micro seminar. But so his approach, he has done similar work, and his approach has been to speed up the viewing of the films. But their methodology has been so far more content analysis by taking the script and matching it to the screen time. So yeah, I mean, definitely there's it's important work, and I work sort of alongside of them, but not in the same path, if you will.
Yeah, and then just a quick follow-up to that. Like, you keep invoking open source, yet TK3 is kind of dead, and this project's closed, and Gina Davis, I don't see anything there GitHub. Like, how are you justifying your use of this terminology?
Well, this project isn't closed. TK3, yes, is you know, when it died, it was a tool of its time, and that was a concern. But all of our code's on GitHub, and we're funded by the NSF, and you know, we should be open source because taxpayer money pays for this stuff. So I think that every project isn't necessarily going to be a success, just like R&D in the private sector. But I still think that it behooves us. Actually, the fact that some of these are no longer in service is why we need to weigh in even more, because if we can get in at the level of the tool development, we can ensure that the ideology that informs it and the functionality is scholarly in nature. So we're broken for the moment, but we won't be for long. And you know, it's every other kind of machine reading image project that I know of has published its code, but it's labor intensive, you know, so really anyone with the time can kind of crunch their own images. I felt I could just concentrate on my work and do the crunching and not have to even make the case that I'm opening it up for a large use, but I just felt the need to you know, help shape a field and to help shape the tools that scholars are able to use. So I know open source isn't always the answer, but in my case I feel really strongly about it. You know. It's a good question though. Thank you. Sorry.
So I don't know if this is a technical question or just an expression by confusion, but it wasn't clear to me what the sort of the data that you are actually processing in this platform. So are you taking the individual frame digitization of the film as your
All
starting
digitized
point?
film, yeah.
So in some ways when you say the frame is disappearing, you're not, I mean, it is actually the starting point of any digitized film in the cinematic sense where you have a video in a sense. That is the starting point.
Right.
So that is what the data set begins with, is the full digitization of each frame in a sequence.
No, It's film that's been digitized, that's at the Internet Archive, and it's been converted, and digitizing it makes it learnable. What I meant about the frame is that in order to apply computer vision algorithms to a full film, you have to cut it up. You have to section it.
No, but so this was, then I have a more interesting question actually after that. Well, because I want to make the analogy with what's been happening over a longer period of time with digital humanities on text, because it seems like the book is pre-cut up into words, and there's a lot of, you could say arguably interesting but often not interesting work done with just counting the words and doing as much processing as you can on the words. But there's no way that we've found yet to do any interesting, scalable equivalent of interpretation. You can't code the transitions, you can't code close readings, you can't code interesting repetitions. And it seems like what you're really challenging us here with is how to think about translating interpretations into and scaling them up through the computer using something like a film, which is really massively complicated.
It is, and I'm so glad you raised this, because the whole point for me too, and I think the digital humanities has gotten such a bad rap because you got people like Franco Moretti and saying it's only distant reading. And to me, no, this is and so the same analogy holds. The interpretive, I want to make it available to be interpreted, and so, but with film, they're identifying objects, identifying camera angles and stuff. That is something that we just can't do by hand. So it's really, I think of it almost more as a filter, a search engine that returns interesting results that then we can do close readings of.
Yeah, I guess I raise it because it seems like the first step is not even available to you as it is with the text, because it's already, the chunks of text are already there to be found so easily. Whereas
They are,
in your case, like you said at the beginning, is even the framing and the objects are already so hard to identify. There's already an interpretive layer.
Right.
So the challenges are there, but the results are going to be more interesting. But I just say, wow, the challenges.
It is a huge, I know, yeah.
But I'd like to talk more later, because it seems like this idea of scaling up close reading is what I'm interested in the textual side, rather than just keep counting, but how to scale up machine interpretation seems more interesting.
Right, yeah, it is, and that's definitely what we're after here. It's just to make it available to be able to be studied, because we've automated the process of filming, of taking the stuff, but we haven't automated the process of finding it, and this was the case already, more than 10 years ago where the challenge was not to create an image, but to find one, so I think, and I think you're right. Engage the text analytics has been so not interesting, although I would love to see a whole run sample of everything Donald Trump has said in a debate, because I don't know that there's full sentences, really, if you think about it. So I think that's kind of interesting, but yeah, text is definitely.
Most people don't speak in full sentences. If you do transcripts, when you look at them, it's very hard to read them.
Right. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, and again, optical character, that's voice recognition, speech recognition is not in great shape yet either. So, so they're all key questions. But yeah, certainly the video part is one of the most dicey. Yeah, but I don't know. We have to study it.
You're a pioneer.
Yeah.
When we use topic modeling tools, one way that you can use topic modeling is as an advanced search.
Yeah.
Because you can sort, a million articles from a newspaper, group them into what are the 20 topics that rise to the top, that are most frequently recurring. And frequently recurring with each other. And it doesn't really necessarily tell you anything that the algorithm groups those words to form a topic, but it might tell you, oh, that's there.
Right.
That piece is something I should look at more. Do you think that is sort of, to David's question?
I think that's analogous.
It's an advanced search, sort of like the first
Oh,
way
definitely.
that is going to be used for interpretation.
Yeah.
Because then the second step is basically the close reading.
Right.
what
Right.
those frames are.
Yeah.
Not
And that's-
frames, but- yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, even with the text though, it seems so easy, but I'm directing a project of a graduate student, we've got terabytes and terabytes of 19th century British newspapers. And they claim that they are OCR'd, which we trusted, and yet it turns out every time he's looking at mosaics and murals in that time period, and we're getting just crazy results. I mean, just the hand, the manual labor is so insane. So yeah, it's not appreciably different, but getting it down to the point that we can even put it into topic modeling has been a problem.
Yeah, because OCR.
Yeah, so, and again, that's the vision thing that is really similar in some ways to this, is just the computer vision versus that's why we have so many algorithms. We have several that detect color and color spread. We have pattern recognition ones, we have edge detection. We have OpenCV, which is the facial recognition that they use at the airport. That we just put in the front end just to kind of section it off. So yeah, it's really a complex problem, sorry.
Something you crystallized for me a moment ago when you said the word it, getting it in or reading it or whatever. It feels as though part of what you're struggling with and opening new tools to define is it. What do we mean, if you will, by this visual, multimedia, video experience? It's not the frame anymore. It is the example you gave of the woman who danced but wasn't dancing. All of these perspectives, the stuff can be cut in so many different ways to define what we're looking at and defining and interpreting. So the whole question of, the next question of it is also part of it, I would guess.
Right, yeah.
Or is being brought up.
And I think that's what's been so unsatisfying to date about some of the projects that are looking at massive amounts of data and some of the topic modeling or some of the, the results I think initially seem in some ways kind of obvious. Our early results about 1950s instructional video showed us stuff we knew. The authority figures are there. They're always shot from a down angle, so to reinforce their authority. The little girls in the frame are there about, if they're lucky, maybe half the time as the little boys. They're usually not doing a whole lot. And so it's all the things that we sort of know already from all, our 100 or, 80 years of cinema theory. And so in some ways it seems like a lot of effort for very little reward. But I think what you're getting at is completely true. Just the very fact that these things surround us and we're not able to study them, I think is very problematic. And so finding ways into that is what we're doing. I will say that it definitely, using both, a perfect system from my point of view is to capitalize on the strengths of human vision and computer vision and try and have a way to marry those processes. We have, the one difference between text is that we have a Dewey Decimal System or whatever. We have double and core. They have an indexing system, so we can know a little bit more about what's there. With video archives, we don't even know what's in them, so yeah, it's a bit of an open question. It'll certainly, I don't get bored. But I think what's been really helpful, and I know people have to go and I don't want to keep, what's been helpful has been the response, especially from many of our students. I am at the school that is making a lot of the media that people see, arguably not all of it, but just to show the responsibility. We've had a lot of our graduate students say, I never sort of realized the weight and the responsibility I have in representation and in representing things well. And that's where I think images differ in some ways from words. Although words have a graphical component, we're used to just thinking of them at the conceptual level, and the formal level is not as much, considered. So studying both form and content is really an important task, I think. Whatever the new thing might
Any last questions? Okay, thank you so much.